Welcome back to another episode of Self-Care, Sound Mind, the podcast and live series. I'm Kiara Moore, and I'm back with episode 3. Tonight, I'm super excited to have my special guest, Anitra Green from Taylormade Behavioral Health Solutions. And tonight, we are talking about grief. Hey, hello, everyone. Welcome to Self-Care, Sound, the podcast and live series. I am super excited to have you back for yet another episode. Today, we are on episode 3, and I am super excited. Let me go ahead and share this for all the world to see. Welcome. Come on in the room. We are live. Self-Care, Sound Mind, a podcast and live series. All right. Shared. Welcome everyone. Self-Care, Sound Mind, the live series and podcast. We are episode 3, and tonight we are talking about grief. Self-Care, Sound Mind, the podcast and live series. My goal is to uplift, inspire, encourage, and empower. Every 2 weeks, I'll be coming to you with a special guest to discuss all things mental health. Today, we are talking about grief, a heavy topic. And child, we're going to get in it today because I've been all up in my grief bag. So we're gonna get into it. But before I introduce our special guest, I want to go over a few things with you. I want to share some self-care information and some self-care announcements. So my first self-care event for the year, I was super excited about it, but because we are still in a pandemic, it had to be postponed due to some people being exposed, but I will keep you all posted on self-care activities that you can engage in throughout the area. I will still shout out Core Love Yoga. They are a studio in the Dover and Smyrna area. They have all kinds of fun things. They have aerial yoga. They have bungee fitness. They have pole fitness and all kind of wonderful stuff. So check out Core Love Yoga and see what they have to offer. And ladies, we'll come together and we'll do our event at Core Love Yoga whenever we can. So I also want to shout out Confidently You. My shirt says be bold, be strong, be confident, and my lips match. This shirt is by Chanel Williams, and she can be found at Confidently You, the letter U, on Facebook and Instagram. She has all kind of great self-care affirming apparel. She also has a new book that she just wrote. So shout out to Chanel and Confidently You. Next, I want to invite you to buy a shirt with a purpose. As you know, my group practice, Embracing Oak Therapy, our mission, our goal, our drive is to provide mental health therapy to everyone in need. And that includes those who may not be able to financially afford it with the times that we are facing right now. So if you would purchase this shirt that says Tender Loving Self-Care, because you know we all need a little tender loving self-care. The shirt is $20, and all proceeds from the shirt will directly go to the Embracing Oak fundraising campaign. If you would not like a shirt, for my men out there, you can donate directly to the GoFundMe campaign, and you can find that at embracingoak.com. And you can find the t-shirt in the self-care shop at embracingoak.com or kiaratmore.com. And of course, I'll put all of that in the chat. Now that is out of the way, let's see, are there any more announcements? If you have a self-care product that you would like me to showcase on the show, please email me at kmoore, Kmoore, at embracingoak.com. All right, let's get into it and let's begin to talk grief with my special guest. Everybody, let's welcome Miss Anitra Green. Anitra is a licensed clinical social worker and a founder of Taylormade Behavioral Health Solutions, a brand new private practice here in Delaware, y'all. Let's give it up for Anitra. Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you?
I am wonderful. I am wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Give me 2 seconds to make sure. Okay, we are good. I'm wonderful. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. I am so glad to have you here. For everyone out there, for all of my friends and family out there, can you just introduce us and tell the world? I mean, I know you've been on a lot of lives and stuff, but tell my people who you are and what you are doing.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I am Anitra J Green, and I'm the founder of Taylormade Behavioral Health Solutions. I am new in business, and my practice opened March the 22nd. I actually had my grand opening March the 20th, and I took my first client on March the 22nd. I specialize in grief and loss. I also treat children and adults. And pretty much I'm on a mission to help break the stigma of mental health, particularly in communities of color. So I'm excited to be in this space, and I appreciate the invitation, Kiera.
Absolutely. I am super excited to have you here. And I know that grief is not the only thing that you do, but with the times that we are in, sorry, I'm trying to get my camera right. With the times that we're in right now, I feel like we have been in a constant state of grief over the past year and a half, like since the pandemic. There has been such a heaviness because of all the, grief and loss of, loved ones, but also what many people don't think about is we also grieve changes in our patterns, our schedules, changes in what we know as life. Like I think about the children who are school age, right? And how everything they've ever known has changed. They've lost all sense of control. And people don't really realize that the negative responses to those feelings, that's grief. So what do you say to the person who is just really having a hard time grieving all of the changes and loss of the pandemic? How have you been helping your clients?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think prior to COVID-19, we really associate grief with death. And I think that what COVID did was, redefine what grief and loss means. And I've said this since the pandemic started. We've all lost something.
Right.
You've lost something. I've lost something. Some people have had multiple losses. And so I have a lot of clients who this pandemic has exacerbated their grief. They not only have they physically lost people, but they have lost jobs. Their children have lost graduations.
Yes.
They've lost employment. We've lost our sense of normalcy. I've been talking a lot about self-care. I've been talking a lot about self-care being a tool because it is important. We have to take care of ourselves. And I think that people think self-care is, optional. But it's not, right. We really have to take care of our minds. And so just allowing people to pause and really identify. And I've been helping a lot of clients identify that heavy feeling that they have is grief because people don't always associate with their feeling, again, without having it connected to death, that you're grieving. And so I've had to say that even relationships that are going through a tough time, right? The divorce rates, I have clients who are separating, some who are in the process of divorce because, again, a lot of stressors from the pandemic just put things over the top. And so I told a client just today, you're on a grief journey. And she said, I never really, I never thought about divorce as a grief, but you're going through all of the different stages. You're shocked, you're angry, it's a loss. It's a loss of a relationship. So I've been helping clients redefine what grief is, educating them and really talking a lot about self-care and just allowing themselves to go on a journey. because it is certainly a journey.
Right. And I love what you said. Just piggybacking on when you brought up the graduation, immediately I thought of we're losing out on experiences, right? We're losing out on these special moments, like early on during the pandemic, mothers are giving birth alone, grandparents aren't seeing their children, like the loss of experiences. I saw something where, some, graduations are postponed and family members may not have lived to see the postponed graduation. Like there are a lot of various types of losses, and we have to give space to that. And we have to acknowledge that it's not just death that we're grieving here. There are so many other things. And one thing that I'm not really hearing people talk about is the fact that this is I don't want to say it's always going to last, but it's a long lasting thing. Like grief is not something that you just cope through one time. No. I always say grief doesn't fight fair. You could be having a wonderful day, everything going well, and next thing you know, you get sucker punched in the gut with a trigger for your grief, right? And we want to give space to that. We want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to acknowledge and process it. But how, I guess not how, but I guess we have to make sure as helpers that we are setting people up for success with the realization like this is not going to be a one and done. This is something you have to work through, right? And so what do you say to the person who's struggling with the process? Like how would you encourage someone with that?
So I use the word journey very intentionally when I say that grief is a journey. And I usually start out with that. Mm-hmm. This is a process. There is not a time limit, and you have to have a lot of grace with yourself, and you have to have a lot of patience, because it is not a linear process where first you're going to feel this, then second you're going to feel this, right? It's more like cycles.
Right.
You feel overwhelmed in the beginning, and then it calms down, and then here comes a wave. It's like the ocean. That's one of my favorite statements, that grief is like the ocean, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes by Vicki Harrison is one of my favorite quotes about grief, because it's unpredictable. At times you might be fine, and then you might see a person who looks like a person that reminds you. And I'm specifically talking about death. Right. I think that all losses are hard, but death is the most difficult because it's so final. There is nothing to compare it to. And that is specifically when you're on a grief journey. Other losses are replaceable. Well, not all. However, people have divorces and they remarry. When I say that, I mean that in other cases, you have the opportunity to, if you lose a job, you can get another one. Right. But when someone dies, they are irreplaceable. There is not another person that you can, they're gone. Right. That's what makes death so difficult. And so I do tell people it's patience. I had a client recently, 10, 15 years. Am I still supposed to be feeling this way? Absolutely. Your love for a person never dies. So you're always going to be reminded of their absence in some way.
I love that. I absolutely love that. You said something and it definitely made me think. There are times when people are like, well, I thought I was over this. I was doing so well. And they beat up on themselves for what they think might be like a grief relapse, but there's no such thing. You may feel better in the moment, but when you grieve the loss of whatever it is, you still experience it as if it's fresh, right? But the difference in the journey is that later on in the journey, you learn how to navigate the effects of that grief and those feelings a lot better. And while it might be intense in a moment, the aftermath is what changes, right? I always tell people you're always going to grieve them. The intensity of the grief is what changes, right? So in those moments, in those critical moments, anniversaries and holidays, the triggers are going to be much heavier, right? But then you get to the point where you're not, in essence, forgetting about them in any way, but you're learning to live life with your new normal, your new reality. Right?
Yes, it is a new normal. Absolutely.
Yes. So, and with the pandemic, and part of me is like, do we have to keep talking about it? But it's so very present. Like, I'm experiencing the recent loss of a friend, family members to my close friends, and it's tough. So let's talk to the helpers for a minute, okay? How do we as helpers create space for our own grief while helping everyone else? Because let me tell you something. It has not been easy.
Not at all.
Helping everyone else. There are times when I want to be like, sis, me too, okay?
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure that out too. I need toilet paper too. I need gas too. You know what I mean? So for the very first time, it's more than just, oh, I've experienced what you've experienced, or I can empathize with you and help you through it. Now it's like, I'm on quarantine, you're on quarantine. I'm staying at home, you're staying at home. My job has changed drastically, your job has changed drastically.
Absolutely.
Well, how do we create space? Because I mean, at this point, we've figured out a way to get through. But how do we actually make sure we're okay? So, you know I'm asking you to preach to the choir right now, but the choir needs to be preached to, okay?
Yeah,
how do we as helpers make sure that we're getting our own help?
Yeah, that's good. And I was getting ready to say, my answer to that is practice what we preach. I mean, the reality is, and an interesting thing is that I do this work, but I always say this, and I'll talk a little bit about grieving with hope later, but I literally am on multiple grief journeys while I'm helping people on their multiple grief journeys. So one of the things that I have to do is I practice what I preach. When I tell people to practice self-care, every other Friday, I go get a massage. I take a walk every day for an hour. I drink water. I journal. I talk about my feelings. I pray. And at certain points in my journey, I have personally, as a mental health professional, had to go into spaces and get support. And people, it's like, listen, it's no shame in my game. Listen, if therapy worked for other people, and I'm glad that I did it, because I can speak to the fact that it is helpful.
Right.
It's specifically for death. And so, for me, I was in bereavement overload, and I didn't start with my story, but in 1999, I lost 3 people while I was in graduate school. And it was a lot. This is where me and grief, when people say grief shows up and says, sorry, we had to meet like this. That was my story. We had to meet like this. And so, I practice what I preach, honestly. Because if you don't have the mental capacity yourself, and you don't know how to manage your own stress, you're really not going to be able to help yourself, your own family, or anybody else. And so in order to do this work, you really have to. I think people who do this work have to probably practice even more self-care, because we're bearing the burdens of a lot of other people. You also have to know how to cut it off. You need to not work 7 days a week and cut your cell phone off and stop checking emails. You got to find a work-life balance, because if not, especially in this pandemic, you literally can be on the phone or working nonstop without a break. So take a lunch break, take a walk on your lunch break, go have some fun, watch something fun on television, take a vacation.
Yes.
All of that.
All of the above. Absolutely. I mean, it is so critical. Like, everything, and for those of you who are not therapists, like, sometimes you get people who come to therapy and it's not super heavy, right? Like, but grief, that's heavy, right? Like, I'm one of those people, I see you cry, I gotta make sure I fight all my shit. You know what I mean? And so when you're in this grief space, you really have to be able to be present for your client, but also check your own stuff. And honestly, I have shied away from doing as much grief work as I used to do since my brother passed. My brother passed 5 years ago, suddenly, and tragically. And before then, like, I was like certified grief recovery specialist. It's like a special grief training, and I really loved their model. I was doing groups, I was doing individual sessions on grief, and after that, I'm like, pump the brakes, because I am absolutely not practicing what I'm preaching. When I was leaving my process, I was going to work and being a wonderful present therapist, going to the bathroom, crying my eyeballs out, going back to the next session, being present. So I was giving myself space, but it was really hard for me to allow myself to be in that vulnerable space for other people all the time. I did have one that I did some grief work with. I didn't really have a choice at that point, but the situation was so similar that it was scary. So, and working with her, it wasn't triggering for me. It was actually helpful, because that was one of the cases where it was like, we in this together, you know? So I did shy away because I couldn't be a great therapist in that arena, dealing with the things that I was dealing with. And so now that I am in a different place of my grief, I'm doing it more in the capacity of postpartum and, infant loss and things like that, just really getting into that. But you're so right, where we have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, because if we're going to hold our clients up and we're going to be there for them and we're going to support them, we got to be able to shed those layers too at the end of the day, because otherwise we just adding layers on to our own self.
Yes.
And then sooner or later it's going to be too heavy for us to bear. So let's transition just a little bit and talk about your private practice for a little bit. Tell us about Taylormade Behavioral Health Solutions.
Yes, it's like when you say that name, I feel like a new mom. How people feel about their baby. I had a 2-month-old.
You're right.
But I'm excited about Taylormade. So Taylormade, my maiden name is Taylor. So my business is actually named after me. And I wanted to have my name in the business because counseling is personal. And so, your name is very personal. And it was a vision that I had for like 7 or 8 years. Probably it might even be close to a decade. And I decided to pursue private practice right now because the pandemic definitely escalated mental health. And after being in a lot of prayer and thinking about it, and I actually stopped. I was in a doctoral program and I put the pause button on it because I just felt like you need to pursue this now. Sometimes timing is everything. And so, after praying, I felt like, I'll get back to Dr. Green in the future. But
right now,
a couple people have given me honorary doctorate degrees. They're calling me Dr. Green. I'm like, hold up, not yet. However, keep speaking it. Right. But I stopped because I saw my phone was literally ringing, not even being in practice. First of all, people were calling and pulling my resumes and saying, are you interested in doing telehealth? And I said, who is this? Right. Who's calling me? And then I was getting phone calls.
Who sent you?
Right. And then I had people saying, hey, you do Grieving with Hope, which I'll talk about that later. It is an organization that's hopefully it'll be a nonprofit soon. But people knew that I was doing grief work, but they thought I had a private practice for grief. And so after just getting a lot of phone calls and seeing the needs, I decided January 4th, which actually is my grandmother's death date. So I feel like that day was bittersweet because I felt like it was a kind of full circle, right? That's the day my grandma took her last breath. I got the email, hey, your business is official on this day. So I kind of say it's such a symbol. It's a lot of symbolism in it for me.
Yes.
So, January 4th, I became an official LLC, but I didn't open my doors until March the 20th. And Taylormade is a telehealth. Right now, I'm virtual only, but mental health consulting and counseling organization that specializes in grief and loss. One of my missions primarily is to not only serve the grief and loss population, but to also do a lot of training and education. I hope to help train therapists who, as you said, Kiera, a lot of people don't want to deal with grief. They don't know where to start. It's heavy. How do you do it? And having been in this world for a while, there needs to be more people. And now after the pandemic, everybody is going to have to deal with grief and loss. Really, it's going to be a universal thing where if you're a therapist, you're going to see grief and loss. If you never saw it before, you're going to see it now. So we have to be trained, right? You can't stay away from it anymore. And so instead of it being like a highly specialized area, my hopes is to take some of the stigma out, take some of the anxiety out of it, take redefine what it means to work with grief and loss, because again, it's not just about death, and so when we carry the whole grief is so much broader than death into our work, it means something different.
Yeah.
I'm also hoping to address consulting, doing trainings in organizations dealing with professional grief, which is a hidden kind of grief. All the nurses and the doctors and social workers and frontline bury. Like, really, they don't train you to deal with what we're dealing with. They don't, right? You understand that death and dying is going to be a part of your work, but not like this. So the hopes is to do
I've had some doctors and nurses on my case during the pandemic, and honey, let me tell you, they about to be flooding our offices. So if you out there, you better be ready.
Yes. And I'm putting together a professional grief training, because professional grief is different than personal grief, but it's real. And I think that people underestimate how it affects people. And then the last part is really trying to do some advocacy around grief and loss, talking about these 3 and 4 days off for bereavements. Like, that has to change. Right. And I have clients who told me, they gave me 3 days off after I lost my child. And I'm like,
let me just pause in here. Okay. My brother died. My brother died on a Friday, right? And so he was on life support for 3 weeks. And so the first week I was down there, my family's in Pittsburgh. So the first week I was down there, I came home that weekend, went to work the next day, because I was like, I can't just stay home and just sit here doing nothing, and it's going to drive me crazy. Went to work Monday through Thursday. Friday, got back on the road, went 5 hours to the hospital, stayed there. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, left, went back home, went to work Monday. That next Friday, I was on my way to Pittsburgh when I got the call that he passed. I got 3 days, but obviously I was going to take more time, because then I had to literally, like, my parents were totally incapacitated, like, take care of the funeral, like, buy the clothes for the funeral, pick out the casket, buy the burial plot. While we're buying his burial plot, we get the call that my grandfather dies.
Wow.
They didn't give me more time.
Unbelievable.
Unpaid time, no paid time off. Like, I just had to use all of my time that I had, because they weren't giving me. And I'm like, I had 2 deaths back to back, and you didn't do, like, just no card, no flowers, no sorry to hear that, and when will you be reported to work, kind of thing. That is totally, not only is it like inhumane, it's just the last thing a person needs to deal with when they're experiencing the most devastating time in their life is worrying about their job.
Absolutely. And I just think that the policies speak to how our society, number one, we don't talk about death in our society, and then we treat it like it happens every day. But when the reality of it, first of all, when you show back up to work, you're physically there, you're not mentally there. So, and then your brain grief affects your body. It affects your concentration. It affects your productivity. It affects your
memory.
Right. So then when you're doing work, the quality of it is, we already know what the quality of it is. And so I just feel that there needs to be conversations around, like, changing policies around bereavement. I mean, we got to give folks more than 3 days off and 4 days off, and 1 day for grandpop and 2 days for aunt, mother, father, and 3 days for a kid. Like, this is,
that's not even enough time to take care of the arrangements.
It's not. That's why I said, I don't know, when people are writing these policies, they don't understand. And I lost my dad during the time that I was working at the current school that I'm in right now. And I was appreciative of a boss who, I think because she had lost her mother the year before, she understood it. And she said, hey, break it up. Hey, you know what? Don't come in. And I paced myself. Like, I went to work for 3 days and I took off 2, and then I went in for 1. Then I'm like, let me take these 2 off. My dad passed on a Wednesday. So I had to strategically figure out how I was going to get off 2 weeks, because, like you said, but I was due to come back on that Monday. And she's like, don't come back Monday. Don't come back Tuesday if you can. But I really appreciated it, because I know she was trying, like, she gets it. She understands that losing a loved one changes your entire world. And there are some people who don't return back to work. And so, not to stay on that, but that is just something that's near and dear to my heart, because I hear people have to decide whether or not they're going to take the time off that they need, or try to avoid financial ruin because they can't afford to do both, right? It's easy to say, take unpaid leave, but financial stuff is stressful. So now I got to decide if I'm going to grieve or get paid.
Right. And then the alternative is they go back to work. They're not able to keep up with the pace because they're grieving, and then penalized for, poor work, right?
Yeah, that has to change. So I'm hoping that in doing these professional grief trainings and talking to companies about like, hey, and while we're doing the training, maybe when you get a better understanding of grief and loss, you can look at your bereavement policies and overhaul them. They're antiquated and they don't reflect what people need, what grieving people need. And everybody talks about it, right? But it's not. It's like, where do you start? And it's like, well, it starts with HR and employers understand it. And I think COVID is going to help push this agenda because people's workplaces have been affected. This has affected so many people that I do think that the time to have this conversation is now.
I agree 100% because some people don't believe something exists until it happens.
Until it happens to them. And this has happened to a lot of them, right? A lot of us. So I hope that this is the beginning of the lenses coming off about grief and really how it affects people.
I love that. Absolutely. And I love what you said about changing the policy, because while, yes, we are definitely needed to help all of the individuals experiencing grief and loss, but changing the policy, changing the big picture, it's going to continue to happen. The world that they're trying to acclimate back into after this grief and loss is not conducive to them. And so by you going at a higher level to deal with those issues through policies and procedures and, human resources, I think that's a wonderful way to address it. They're after how many hundreds of years are they finally talking about extending maternity leave or like the need for that, or new parent leave in general, so I know it takes time, but I'm so glad to hear that you are advocating for that. That's a huge part that people don't get to see, is how much we have to advocate for major change. So I absolutely am. I love that.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your group? What's going on with the group?
Sure. So right now, I am not running a group, but I am working on a specific group for people who have had lost a loved one to COVID. That is something that I'm looking to start this summer because that loss for many people is very different. Like, right, the traditions, the rituals, the typical things that people do, saying goodbye to your loved one over the phone. There are so many things that people did not get a chance to do to get closure. And even feeling that they didn't give their loved one a proper burial. It's just so much that has happened with COVID. So I would like to run a COVID specific group. But I do want to talk about Grieving with Hope. So Grieving with Hope is separate from Taylormade. It actually existed before I opened the private practice. And there is a Facebook page called Grieving with Hope with Anitra and Janelle. I do a supportive group, a community Zoom, the first Sunday of every month. So if you are watching, if you want to go to like the page, Grieving with Hope with Anitra and Janelle. Janelle was one of my close friends, and we're looking at, she's had her own grief journey, and we decided to partner up. I began it, and we joined forces, and it's been an amazing time coming together and allowing people to talk about grief. And it's been great. How often do we get a chance to talk for an hour and a half about death, about loss, about the hurt, about the pain, about the journey? And so that's been going great. We bring guest speakers on. So that is something that I am doing. That is a group, again, it's not necessarily a therapy group, but it is a community supportive group, and where people can talk and share. It's very interactive. And again, it's the first Sunday of every month. So June 6th is our next one. So that has been going well. I also am looking at starting a group for those who are struggling with cancer. Cancer is near and dear to my heart because I've lost several family members to cancer. And I have a client who actually inspired me to do this. We talk about her loss, the journey of losing her hair and getting a mastectomy, and how losing your body, and your body going under so much duress and changes, it's a loss. And so in talking to her and in having a couple of classmates who we've had some conversations about grief in terms of losing your health and cancer, because it's a lot. And so I'm
It's a
looking at
reoccurring grief.
and it's a reoccurring grief, and then you have to, it's a lot that goes with it. So I'm really trying to find some specialized groups that you can't find every day that are relevant. My thing with Taylormade is trying to be outside of the box and look at where are the gaps. So for me, COVID is
where are the gaps? Yes.
Where are the gaps, right? You can find grief groups everywhere, but who's doing something for specifically for COVID? Who's helping out? Every day somebody is getting diagnosed with cancer, and it is a lot. And so it's a lot emotionally, it's a lot physically, and they are grieving their health loss.
Yes.
And so those are some things that I have coming down the pipe. I am working on organizing these two specific groups, but for now, Grieving with Hope. And also, I have run groups in my school for children. I do a lot of collaboration with Peter's Place. They've been a great place. It's where I've received some of my training. It's a great resource for children because, again, we don't want to forget about our young people in this pandemic. We have a lot happening, and so those are some things that I'm working on now, and some things that are coming down the pike for Taylormade.
And they can find those by just staying up with you on your website.
So I'm at Taylormade BHS on Facebook. I am working on an Instagram page. My technology. Oh, I'm learning. I'm getting there. So Instagram is coming soon, but I am on Facebook. You can find me at Taylormade BHS, and my website is www.taylormadebhs.com. You can find out about me, my philosophy on therapy, what I'm doing. I will update my website to say when the groups begin. And again, I take insurance. I know it's a lot of things that I can say about Taylormade. I do take insurance.
Yes. Tell them what insurances you take, and are you accepting clients?
So right now I am accepting clients beginning June 1st. Right now my schedule is booked, but I will be
book schedule. Hold up. 2 months.
Y'all feel me?
Booked.
I am booked. So right now, and I just added my last client, but I will be accepting new clients.
Please still.
Yeah, but I am creating a wait list, and my wait list is 2 weeks. So if you can wait till June 1st, excuse me, if you can wait till June 1st, I will be reopening at that time, and I'll be expanding in the summer. We'll be taking on new clients in the summer. June will be the month of expansion for me.
Come on,
I am serving 14 and older, and right now I accept all Blue Cross, Blue Shield in Pennsylvania and Delaware, because I'm licensed in PA and Delaware. I'm also accepting Delaware Health Options, and I am awaiting Aetna, Cigna, and United. So those are the next 3 up any day now. For those, I'm kind of in the final phases, and I take flexible spending accounts and HRA. So if you have any of those, I have clients that I see. Of course, I take cash, credit card, Venmo, Zelle, credit cards,
Take it all.
Visa.
Get your help by any means
necessary.
I love that.
So I don't want to keep any category out, but I do understand. And I do have a sliding scale fee. I do have 10% of my practice I will see for a sliding scale. I do understand that people, this pandemic has affected people. So I do a sliding scale fee as well for a percentage of my practice.
Okay. So one last thing I want to get into. Okay. So the Grief Recovery Institute, right? That's who I did my grief specialization in. They have what they call the 5 myths, or what not to say is how I usually describe them in grief, right? And so they are, let me see if I can remember from memory. So grieve alone, right? People think that they're supposed to grieve alone, like they're not supposed to show that they're grieving, or they don't want people to see that they're hurting. That's not true. You do not have to grieve alone. And for real, your family, your children, they need to see you grieve, because that teaches them how to grieve. So if you lock yourself in your room for 3 days because you're grieving, what you think your child's going to do when they grieve? They're going to emulate that same behavior. So grieve alone. Time will heal. Time ain't gonna do nothing but make that grief just dusty. It's gonna stay right there. If you're not doing nothing with it, it's gonna be right there. If you're not processing with it, it's gonna be a 20, 30-year-old wound that's still bleeding because we haven't done anything. Because time doesn't do nothing but just go, right? What else? Grieve alone. Time will heal.
Be strong for other people.
Be strong for other people. Replace it, right? You can't just replace everything. And even if I can replace it, don't tell me to just get over it. That was the other thing too. Don't tell me to get over it or replace something because you don't know what that thing meant to me. You know what I mean? Like even if it was something that you think was silly or simple, if I'm feeling a sense of loss, then that's important to me. So what are some things that you would say? And even I know that you're a person of faith. So like even I do a lot of training with like grief in the church, right? And so we have this misconception that, you know, while I do believe that prayer works, you got to do more than just pray, right? Like faith without works is dead. So you can pray, but you need to do your part. So what are some things that you would tell a person to do or not to do when it pertains to their grief? What are some practical tips we can do to manage our grief?
So I want to start with the faith because I do want to say this as a believer. I am a Christian and I'm a woman of faith. I think that there is a misconception, however, that when you're a person of faith, that if you grieve that and you need support or you need a counselor or you don't process it from a spiritual standpoint, that you're lacking faith, and it's not true. Right. One has nothing, right. And the reality is that grief can rock your faith depending on where you're at in your spiritual walk. There are people who have had to be like, wait a minute, God. Right. So it doesn't insulate you. Your faith doesn't insulate you from real feelings of grief. The pain is real. We're spiritual and natural. So I would say to a person, don't beat yourself up because you're a person of faith, because we're spiritual and we're natural. Yes. If you are a spiritual person and you believe that, then you know that our wounds, and I always say Jesus was what when Lazarus died, right? He was God in flesh incarnate, right? And he wept. So if Jesus cried, he modeled for us as a Christian. So the emotions are real and pain is real, even when you're spiritual, like this, we talk about Jesus. The second thing I want to say is to not compare your grief journey. I think that sometimes we see how other people are grieving and we think, oh, I didn't cry yet, or I'm not crying every day. Or when I went back to work in a week, but somebody else took a month off. So does that mean I don't care? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that your grief, it looks very different than theirs. That's all that means. It's a statement that says that, you know, our grief is as individual. I believe it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross that said our grief is as unique as our fingerprints. When you know that, you won't compare your grief journey. You cannot do that because you will judge yourself. You'll judge your own journey. And I remember going to a funeral and thinking, how are people laughing at this repast? I said that at my grandma's funeral. How people eating food, laughing and talking about old times, and we just left the cemetery. Like I was upset that people were laughing. I'm like, how dare you? What could possibly be funny right now? And this was my thought, right? And I was angry about it. And of course, at that point, I didn't know it, but it's like, you know what? Their grief doesn't look like yours. Right now, you don't want to laugh, and that's fine. If you don't feel like going to the repast or you're not feeling it, you can go head home and do what feels good to you. But you can't get upset at other people or yourself because grief doesn't look a certain way. That's one thing that I would add. The third thing I would say is you have to be patient with yourself. You can't, you know, that rush, you cannot hurry. You know, that song, you can't hurry love, no matter how you try. You can't hurry grief. We're going to remix it. You cannot hurry grief, no matter how you try. You can't think that
you can't do nothing.
It's been a year, right? You can't I've heard people say you can't out hustle it. You can't hurry it. You can't. The only cure to grieving is to grieve. You don't have to fight the fear.
Wait a minute. Come on here. Say that again.
Okay.
The only cure to grieving is
to grieve, right? You have to do it. You have to cry. That fighting the tears, you know, feeling like you have to be strong all the time, not wanting to be vulnerable. we're not the Tin Man, right? We have real feelings, and it's okay to cry. I think that people are like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. I called this person and asked them how their mom was doing, and she started crying. And I go, okay, she started crying. My clients cry. I mean, first of all, I'm a crier myself, so tears don't intimidate me. I think that tears are refreshing, and it's like liquid release. I don't get scared when I see people crying, and it's like, I don't really want to cry. Listen, when you're sad, that's a strong possibility and you need to let yourself, instead of shutting it down and
let it out.
Just let it out. It's okay. And I don't know why I think people think that once they start crying that they're never going to stop and they're going to fall apart. And it's like, okay, you can fall apart. Grief will make you fall apart. But guess what? Next thing you know, you're back together.
Yes.
Because we don't just, we cry and you might cry for half an hour, 30 minutes. Cry. That's why your tear ducts, that's what they're for. And then after you cry, it's like, oh, do you feel better after you cry?
Every time.
Because I usually do, right? After a good cry, I feel better. So I
needed that.
Stop fighting the grief.
And stop apologizing for it.
Stop apologizing for it. And something that people need to know is that if you don't grieve, it's going to come out other ways. You're going to be irritable. You're going to have stomach aches. You're going to have headaches. Your personality is going to change. What else? You can literally become, a different person.
Yes.
With unprocessed. You can literally go from being, right? We want to be, it changes you, but you literally have to allow yourself to just grieve, right? And people don't do that. If somebody is sad and you're supporting a grieving person, this is to the village. Don't rush people through their process. Don't say oh, your mom died last year. Well, this is your second Mother's Day. Yes, you get one mother. They still in that place. They are. And they might be there for the 5th Mother's Day. It's not a time limit on it. And I think people get that feeling that you should be over it. Like you said, Kiera. No, we get through grief. We don't get over it. You don't get over people you love. That's like saying you still love them. That's really what you're asking a person. You still remember them.
Wow.
You still
what a wonderful way to rephrase that.
You still care about your mom, that she's not here no more. You still think about that. Okay, so when you think about
it, you wouldn't say that,
right? Then you can't ask people.
Right, then don't say
right. That's what you're asking them if you say that phrase. And I know people mean well, and until some people will never understand it until they're actually in that place. Some people think they can imagine, okay, well, if something happens to my loved one, I know I'll get through it and God will be okay. We all say that until it happens to us, right? And then it's a whole different story. So you get through it, you don't get over it. It's no time limit, and we don't have to be strong. When people say, well, you better not melt down because your kids, you don't fall apart because
I'm falling all the way apart.
Yeah, fall all the way apart. Your kids is going to be okay. And they might have to be a part of, you know what? I'm having a moment, baby. Or close your door, put the do not disturb sign up, and then let your kids, like you said, check in on them. Ask them how they're doing. Kids grieve
that when you grieve, that they can also release, they can grieve, right? Because children, they just respond through behavior. You can say, I'm having a really tough day today because I'm grieving the loss of XYZ. They just gonna have a tantrum and not know why they upset. You're grieving, honey, and it's okay. Give them the by using yours.
I want to say something about children really quick, because I feel like I'm addressing an adult population, but because I don't want to leave my babies out. I love children. I've been working with children for the last 20 years, really, that I've been more in their world than the adults in some capacities as a social worker. But our kids, one of the reasons that I'm right in the process of working on a children's book, it'll be released probably 2022, because I got a lot going on, but I do have a book that I have the title to. People don't know how to talk to their children about grief. They don't know what to say. I've had parents say, can you talk to my child? Can you tell them that such and such person died? First of all, I'll say the person with the relationship needs to tell them, but let me talk you through what you can say. Right? Be as literal as you can. Don't tell your children that somebody went off to college, because kids are smart and they'll say, oh, well, when they're coming back, they're still in college, right? They're going to come back to you with the story that you told them. Try to be honest. Try to be as brief as you can. You don't need to tell them all the details. If somebody was gunned down, you don't need to tell them the violent details. You can just say, depending on the age, something bad happened and their body's no longer working. And, talk to your kids about every living thing has to die, right? Plants die, this dies, every person has to die. And then today, Pop died. If you say passed away or you use literary terms, they don't understand that, especially when they're young. You literally have to say their body doesn't work anymore. They're not breathing, they're not moving. And then you can add whatever your spirit, whatever. If you're a person of faith, you can say, they're in heaven or whatever. But you do have to let them know it's hard for a child to understand death because it's very, it's not an abstract concept. They don't really understand the concept. The older children, people want to know, should I take them to the funeral? Should I not? I think you have to just know your child. You have to know the environment. You have to know what type of loss. You have to know the environment. If you think that it's going to be people passing out and a lot, or if something goes in a way that you didn't intend, you have to have a plan. I don't know that children need to be sitting on the front row seeing adults. It can be very frightening to them. So it depends on a lot of things. But what I will tell you is your children need support. I would tell anybody when their child has had a loss, you should let your school counselor know. You should consider talking to them and not assume that because they're kids that they can just come back to school 2 days later. Because
the same way you need time going back to work, they need time
going back to school. Ask them the questions. Are you ready to go back? They might say, no, my stomach hurts. I'm not ready. Listen to your children. I know that they're young, but they're specifically when they're old enough to be able to tell you what they need, because they can't concentrate in school. They can't focus. Same way we can't concentrate at work. And for children, I definitely think that book, narrative therapy, letting them talk to a counselor. Grief is tough. It's tough on every population, not just adults. So I did want to do that little plug for my young people because, sometimes people think because children are young, they're not experiencing grief to the same extent. And it's different for them, but it's as real for them as it is for adults.
Yes. Very much so. I am just so grateful for everything that you have shared today. You have been a wealth of knowledge. And for everyone who's just tuning in or watching the replay, we are talking grief with Anitra Green, licensed clinical social worker of Taylormade Behavioral Health Solutions, a brand new but already filled private practice here in Delaware. I am super proud of all the accomplishments you've made over the past few months. I feel like we just met, but we just met and hit it off. And
that's because I went to Pitt and we both was a part of the Westchester Gospel Choir, right? We have all of these overlapping things that we didn't know. We was really sisters from another mother.
How random. Go Rams. Okay.
We're connected on many levels, and now we're in Delaware Black and Brown Therapy Sisters.
Westchester, Pittsburgh, Delaware. We done been in a lot of the same places and know a lot of the same people.
Yes, we do.
I am super excited to just have you as one of the people, one of the colleagues that I have, one of my sister friends that will support. And that's one thing about you. You gonna support, girl. And I appreciate your support and just really coming through today and sharing all of this wonderful information on grief. It's such a hard topic, in all transparency. I have kind of been dreading the conversation today because I feel like I am at that place where I'm like, I need to give my grief some space. And I am trying to really do that for myself within these next few days. I'm trying to wait until I know this just sounds crazy. I'm trying to wait until my life calms down a little bit once my full-time job is done for the summer. But I'm really going to be focusing on just, really just checking in with myself. And so if you're out there, if you are feeling like you're just not yourself, or you're not operating at the capacity that you're usually operating at, or you're just feeling a little bit of brain fog, you might be having signs of burnout, honey, and you need to take a break. I was talking with someone the other day, and I said I've come to the conclusion that my ambition and my body have a quarterly meeting and be like, okay, it's my turn. Okay. You've run amok for the past 3-4 months, and now it's time for you to sit yourself down and regroup. And so my body is taking over, and my ambition is going on a little bit of a break. And we're going to check in and we're going to deal with some of this stuff. But, physical loss, the pandemic, constant change, social injustice, police brutality, racism, all of this stuff, right?
It's a lot.
Oh, child.
It's a lot. And that is why I'm going to be on vacation from June the 11th to the 23rd. I'm taking 12 days off, and I'm going to refresh and recharge and practice self-care and read your book, drop your cape, read the chapter again about taking care of self, right?
Listen, y'all, I'm dropping my cape, I promise. That's why I wrote the book, for myself.
I learned that from you. I'm dropping my cape, right? Because we appear to be superheroes, but guess what? Those capes got to come off, because at the end of the day, we are very much human.
Yes.
And, God's grace is sufficient. But we got to take a break. We got to rest. Rest is very much a part of self-care. So I hope, I definitely have a vacation planned and a couple of vacations planned. And one thing I do is I do practice self-care.
Yes.
Otherwise, you would not be talking to me right now. I would be probably saying I'm leaving the field.
Right. No.
And I'm going to go work at Disney World or do something else.
Right.
So in order for me to stay on the front lines, I gotta, we have to, all of us, not just me, you, all of us have to practice self-care and support one another.
That's one thing I'm good with certain aspects of my self-care, and we have to make sure that we are caring for ourselves in all not just the fun, bubbly, feel-good areas, but the hard conversation areas too, and that's where I'm at. I'm having a little meeting, and we're going to get things together, put things back on track, and just really refresh. But a part of that, if I'm being 100% honest, is addressing some unaddressed grief that I haven't been able to give myself space and time for because of my work in the pandemic. And now I'm like, okay, everyone else is stable. Let's look in the mirror now.
You have to do that. And I think it's wisdom. And I do want to say, for any therapist out here who is doing this work, there was a time that I was not seeing grieving people because my grief journey was so fresh and raw. I just knew that it would not be a good fit. I think that you have to know when to give yourself permission and say, I don't want any transference, counter transference happening. I don't want to go from this person talking about their mother passing away to me talking about my mother passing away, and then we've exchanged roles. So you have to know. Sometimes, guess what? The best thing that you can do is refer and say, this is not my time to address it. So you don't need to feel guilty about it or bad. When I first lost all of those people, I was not working. I was a student, and I was not a therapist. But if I was a therapist during that time, and even now, I've had losses of students, family members. I have had to ask myself, are you ready to do this? Mm-hmm. Can I help this person, or is this too close for comfort? Mm-hmm. If it's too close for comfort, out of respect for my client, I will refer them to somebody else. And sometimes that's just what it looks like as a therapist. You definitely have to know where you're at and what you can realistically do. And if it's not going to help you or your client, then I would say no. So it's real, Kier. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I do think people think, because I'm a therapist and it's to somebody agree, I have to do it. No, sometimes you can't. You want to, but it's just not the time.
Yeah.
So you have to know that.
Just not the time. I am so appreciative of this conversation. Thank you to everyone watching. Thank you, Anitra. You tell everyone where they can find you again.
Sure. So you can, if you're on Facebook, you can check me out. My business Facebook page is at Taylormade BHS on Facebook. You can also find me on Facebook, Grieving with Hope with Anitra and Janelle. That is also our page. Please like and share that resource. And my website is www.taylormadebhs.com. And again, I am accepting new clients right now, but I cannot start with new clients until June 1st. But if you are looking specifically for those that are looking for support with grief and loss, depression, and soon postpartum depression, that is something that I'm going to be addressing in just a little while. Anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and just life transitions and stress. Again, it doesn't have to be that things are at, a certain critical place. Sometimes it's just, I don't know how to practice self-care. I'm stressed and I'm so overwhelmed. Sometimes counseling is just for that basic stress. And I do address that as well. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I do ask that you share this. There's not enough conversations happening about grief. It's not every day that you can listen to an hour conversation about grief and loss. So please share this in spaces specifically where there are grieving people.
Yes, like and share. Thank you so much, Anitra.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. This is Mental Health Month. Thank you so much for
this is Mental Health Month. I don't know how we forgot to mention that, but yes, I am so super, super happy and glad that this went off well. We got past the technical issues and everything worked out. Thank you so much for your time. And everybody watch this replay. If you've missed it, if you are just joining us, go back. You are definitely going to want to hear everything that Anitra shared. Thanks, Anitra.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Remember, grief is a journey. Take hope.
Yes, I love that. Grief is a journey. Take hope. So that was Anitra Green of Taylormade Behavioral Health Solutions. I just want to remind you that we are doing our free therapy campaign for Embracing Oak Therapy. Our mission is that everyone receives the mental health therapy that they need, no matter what their financial status is. And you can help us out by going to embracingoak.com, and where you can click on free therapy to donate directly to our campaign. Or you can purchase this shirt that says Tender Loving Self-Care. It is a woman's V-neck shirt. So if you purchase a shirt for $20, all proceeds of the shirts will be directly donated to that free therapy campaign. I also want to just share, if you are in the state of Delaware and you are looking for a therapist, you can go to the blackbrowndelawaretherapist.com. That's therapist with an S. If you're looking for self-care options or things to do, I have a list of some of my favorite things coming up. Check out Black Girls Hike 2. Check out Sisters Supporting Sisters for their weekly anxiety and depression relief walk. I mentioned Black Brown Delaware Therapist. Check out fitwifestyle.com for online fitness. Check out Self-Care Sound Mind events. And then, of course, follow me, Kiera Moore Therapeutic Services and Embracing Oak Therapy. Next week, we are talking child and adolescent therapy, with my cousin, Shawnisha Thomas. And here's what we got for you next week. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening. We are going to be available on Spotify and anchor.fm in the next few hours. So if you can't watch the replay or you need to watch on the go, download anchor.fm and find Self-Care Sound Mind, the podcast and live series.